I do appreciate you all, and I'm excited to be here. It's been a while. This is the first in-person Poetrio reading, and I am still appreciative of the online audience that we've had, and it's worked. And right now we're actually streaming to our online people who weren't able to get to the store. But I'm also really delighted that you made it here, and we have this small in-person audience, and also you braved the rain, and in my culture when it rains it's a sign of good luck. So I feel like it's a good sign to return to the store and have the rain. That is wonderful. What I would like to do, I have made a slight change in the way I usually introduce poets, just because of the dynamics of in-person space. I don't want to be coming here every 15 minutes introducing the poets. I just, once the readings begin, I want them to flow seamlessly. I don't want to be the one interrupting. So I'm going to mention who these three wonderful poets are at once, and I will introduce them in the way they will read. But once they get here, they are free to again say who they are, and anything that I do not have on the bio, they can mention what's not here so that we know who is reading, and then the reading will continue. That's how it will go. So my name is Mildred Barya, as Stephanie said, and our first reader is going to be Ann Shurgin, who is sitting right here, and her book, While the Whippoorwill Called, is her first debut poetry collection. And Ann grew up in Elizabethton, Tennessee, which isn't far from here, luckily, and holds a degree in English and journalism from East Tennessee State University. After a career in journalism and communications in Texas, she moved back home to the Appalachian Mountains. She is a member of the Southern Appalachian Writers Cooperative and the Appalachian Studies Association. And you all received a link that has all these bios and websites of the poets. So if you want to know more about Ann and her book, feel free to click the link that you have, and you will have more information about her work and her writing. And then the second reader is going to be Hilda Downer, and she's a long-term member of the Southern Appalachian Writers Cooperative and North Carolina Writers Conference. She has an MA in English from Appalachian State University and an MFA in poetry from Vermont College. She retired from teaching, but also worked as a psychiatrist nurse for over 38 years. Her first book of poetry, Bandana Creek, was published by Red Clay Press, and her second book, Sky Under Roof, by Bottom Dog Press, was a Nautilus Golden winner. She has published essays and poetry in numerous journals and anthologies. She lives in Sugar Grove, NC, which also isn't very far from Asheville. And our last reader is going to be Malanda Dekine, who is with us from South Carolina. She is the winner of the 2021 New Southern Voices Poetry Prize. And Malanda is concerned with ancestry, memory, and the process of staying within one's own body. Their work leaves spells and incantations for others to follow for themselves. Dekine is also a Teen House on Path scholar and author of the self-published collection and mixtape, I Am From a Punch and a Kiss, which was published in 2017. Their poems have been published or are forthcoming in the Poetry Out Loud anthology, Poetry Magazine, Emergency Magazine, Southern Humanities Review, Oxford American, and elsewhere. Malanda lives in South Carolina with the dog Malachi, a very wise dog, I am told. So we might get to hear about the dog, but I need to come back, take a seat, and allow the poets to read. And what I've most enjoyed about all these three books is how they deal with memory and going back, revisiting the past, whether that past involves our bodies, whether the past involves ancestry, whether the past involves returning to a place you grew up or you once lived, and then finding that it's changed, but also because the person who is returning to that place is looking at it with new eyes. So let's welcome Ann. Thank you.
Thank you, Mildred, and thank you all for being here today. It's the weather is just, I'm sure, kept a lot of people away, so we really appreciate you coming. First poem I'd like to read is Percussion Mid-Pandemic. I'm out for a walk to breathe fresh air. Last of the fall leaves skitter down the street. Someone comes out of the house just ahead. I pull the mask out of my pocket, stop, turn away, whip it around my ears, reset my earbuds. White porch curtains flap against the rail. Two men sit talking, smoking. A woman joins them, lighting up. I take the outer edge of the sidewalk, head down. Empty garbage cans tip at the curb, lids thumping. I pass the house, give myself 10 yards, undo one ear loop, leave the other attached. Bare branches fiddle bow scratch on power lines. Here comes the race walker, his long gray hair flying. He inhales and blows, fueling angry exertion. I take the other side of the street, a quick re-loop over my right ear. Wind chimes sound every note loud as a dinner bell. I press on, running out of sidewalk, nod to a bearded dog walker, cross the street again. Laughter erupts, staccato, from an open window. I reach the school, walk faster to beat the dismissal bell. Parents lined up in cars sit idle, windows down. 2 more blocks up the hill and around the corner to my backyard. Inside, I lock the door, unmask, breathe, look outside, listen. The percussion of a windy day rises in crescendo as the sky darkens and the timpani thunder in. What we know now. So much is spent on not knowing. Hours at the emergency room. Days wasted regretting the misspoken. A hand pulled back from warm skin. The step forward not taken. Some things we cannot know. The heat of a star. The hour a latent virus will bloom. Where death sleeps and when it will awaken. I will sweat with you through this fever of uncertainty. So speak what you know now. Embellish it with laughter and tears. Then let me cradle your head in my lap and listen to you breathe. Irises. Inside a gray house, a woman watches as I walk by. Take a long, slow look. She thinks I know her secrets, the husband she neglected, the son who cheats, the cancer deep inside that the doctor hasn't found yet. If it hadn't been 2 weeks since she's been out, she would know what really interests me. Her irises have bloomed in 4 bright colors, a barricade between the secrets and the sidewalk river that carries driftwood like me away. Watching. In a clearing at the edge of a muddy road, We slept in your tent, barely touching beneath the quilts, and the pearlescent moon looked down on us and wondered, who will love these women? Earlier that day, in the paddle boats, I saw a man watching us and wondered if he thought the same thing. At the abandoned quarry, we scooped sand for the chimney, one holding the bucket, the other shoveling with a broken layer of stone. Water-worn pockets became eyes and chipped ridges a sounding board for boys, hiding, watching, catcalling. As if love were the only justification for our lives, as if we hadn't already discovered it for ourselves. When you wrapped your shoulders in a thin shawl and gave me your coat, you were cold so I could be warm, and sparks from the chimney fire drifted upward, while the whippoorwill called from the deeper wood, and the pearlescent moon looked down. Copperheads. It was a 2-pit viper week in late July. The first copperhead was like a thick slack of rope, color of Kentucky sand, coiled on the ledge above the waterfall. It could have struck you down before I could run the treacherous trail for help. Instead, an ancient warning, a feeling in your gut stopped you, as if a boulder had risen from root and earth. The second snake, more brightly marked and larger by the school walk, could have slithered between slats, jumped twice its length from under steps, waylaid any one of us in the moonless dark. The flatland man in passing said to let it be, let it hunt rats, let it live at your back door, come out every night and travel the same path you do. Our mountain sister frowned. She knew stories of those bitten, unrecovered, poisoned. Stories the city man wouldn't know. A rotted stick broke and gave the snake a way out. Let it slide beneath steps as we descended, unsteady, off balance, and saw the copperhead waiting at the bottom. Our sister took up her weapon, stood high on the steps, looking down, an Olympian, took aim behind the viper's head and let fall the bright guillotine blade of snow shovel. We watched while copper jaws stretched, released venom at air as the snake whipped muscle, bone, and scale, fought to live until its head was nearly severed and our sister lifted her blade. We stood in the pool of story, cooling our fear. The snake's carcass was carried away in the night by a hungry animal. In the morning, we picked honeysuckle blossoms, broke the stems and pulled the beads of nectar through, sipped the dulcet drops of courage, distilled from viper fangs. Paint Creek. 1. In a summer meadow in the Blue Ridge Mountains, we stopped to rest after hiking the Paint Creek Trail. You sat next to me, your skin brown from being outdoors, blonde hair short, gold wire-rimmed glasses over wise and mischievous blue eyes. You were laughing and drinking tepid water from a Boda, passing it to me. Then you took a handful of pumpkin seeds and raisins from your pack, offered me some, but I was still drinking from the Boda, glancing sideways at you. My sister was there too, wandering around the meadow, picking wildflowers and twining them into her hair. We were all into music, stringing beads, our on and off boyfriends, and our freedom. 2. After work on Fridays, I drove down to spend the weekend with you in your dusty green trailer by the side of the gravel farm road. We'd take bikes down to the bridge where your dog, Pearly May, liked to go swimming. For supper, you cooked a whole grain dish and made my favorite sweet brown muffins. I slept in your tiny back bedroom and in the morning woke to you softly playing Leonard Cohen's Suzanne on your guitar. We drank coffee with powdered milk and comb honey, so white granules and bits of beeswax floated to the top. Once I remember, my sister was there too. We all got high and laughed till 4 in the morning. 3. In town, I lived on a tree street where I could walk to work under a canopy of hardwood branches, my boot prints the first on a foot of fresh snow. When you came to visit, we went to down home to listen to bluegrass, yelling and clapping and drinking beer until they closed the doors. Next day, I went back to retrieve the purse you left hanging on the back of your chair. You were so grateful. I worked at the library ordering new books and found a paperback about women making it on the land. You loved it. We always talked about doing that. You were halfway there already. Then my sister moved to Texas and invited me. Plenty of work there, unlike here. Thinking about moving 1,000 miles away, I told you I'd rather stay in Tennessee close to you. You cut me short. Said a couple of women could only do so much for each other. I became an Appalachian migrant, like so many before me. 4. A few years passed, we wrote, and then you came to stay with us in Texas while you sought cancer treatment at only 32. Once treatment finished, we said goodbye over the front seat of my Dodge Dart. You went to Oregon to cross-country ski and dance with the Sufis. A few months later, Mom called to say she had seen your obituary in the newspaper. You were always ahead of your time. 5. On one of my visits home, I hiked to the top of Round Bald, where your spirit flies with the honeybees. I know it was you lingering on my right arm in slow time. Now the bear sanctuary sign at Paint Creek has fallen over and a familiar haze settles on the mountains. I move forward, still looking over my shoulder, listening for the strum of your guitar, the ring of your auto harp. For all my life, I wanted to go back, to be with you again in our wild young womanhood, when I loved you in ways I cannot explain. But you are gone, the way the mountains have worn down, their minerals scattered across the hills, down the valleys, into Paint Creek, and on to the gleaming sea. Sharing pie. I like mine with vanilla and whipped cream. Her side is plain. We are 2 spoons, 2 cups, 2 separate people, out too late. She dips into my cream. I take her crust. We talk about being old. We sit under the moon with a blanket. I tell her my feelings, but she's mute, just smiles and lifts her spoon. I wonder, does she dream of me making love to her? People don't often get what they want, but I know this time is different. The way she strokes the inside of my arm, leans my way and laughs. The coffee's hot, cafes open all night. We could hold hands across the table, talk about nothing, fade out the door like taillights in fog as the breakfast shift turns. Good friends sharing pie, 1 slice for 2 all-night dreamers. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thanks to Mildred and Stephanie, and it's always a pleasure to be at Malaprops and to read with these fine poets. I'm Hilda Downer. I grew up in Bandana, North Carolina, and I live outside of Boone. My book came out in September 2021, and it's called When Light Waits for Us. Message to the Unborn. A sign saddles the chain across the strip mine road. Do not enter. Feldspar exposed as upturned petticoats, woods still in shock, blackberry seeds carried by the faith of birds are the first to claw the edge of newly impoverished soil. Anything battered offers what might be liked better when diverse forest was not good enough. Forsaken for rock exploded from beneath. Still, there's always a price to pay, even while cobbler bubbles purple over a browning crust, a timber rattler stumbles into the clearing, unable to discern amid thick berries a bird from a small hand. Eventually, black birch stamps out the blackberry stand. A few white pines split in. A vertical mine shaft engages a water table and spills over, bleeding rust into the creek. A horizontal shaft caves in under the pressure of dairy cows, and another surfaces open as a gaping whale outside a potter's shed where he adapts the hole for throwing shards. New wells dug bubble with arsenic. Sweet stems of the birch do fray and make good toothbrushes for walks, but heed my words. Never will the quiet notes of a Solomon seal lilt here again. The delicate microcosm of humus, refined by fungi, symbiotic with forest roots, to the nutrients and exact pH, yield orchids so specialized their pollination requires one particular species of insect. Farther below, blue and green gems in quartzite stretch fingers of illumination through bedrock with a magnetism generated by planets and stars shifting millions of years into beauty to bomb truth. Generations away, no white trillium will be allowed to offer its hope against the charred forest floor. So many people in the world, souls leaping in quickly to grasp the last opportunity to live, born into suffering. This is not living. I want you to live, to taste huckleberries on your walk, to smell the negative ions on the cliff, above the strength roar of the river gorge, with a feeling of peace pulling you back. I want to give you more than what I came with. But the acid sky and metallic ocean will burn the earth down to more darkness than a lonely mine shaft could ever dream up. After the paintings and books are gone, can your souls invent an art to make it worth starting over? Listen while poetry still circles you like a moon. Know that you are the ones I have always spoken to. I wanted you to find hidden places that you would love, inside rooms of rhododendron, or where miniature yellow lady slippers grow in limestone-rich soil. Know that I love you, and I want to meet you, and that I do not want to bear this cruel message. Do not enter. Buttons. I cannot guess the number of buttons in the huge Vaseline jar. A kaleidoscope of variety and color slinks a waterfall over my fingers into a lake across the table. Culled from flour sack dresses, infant clothes, and military jackets, some are big as a doll's plate. Others so tiny and delicate that their white is transparent. Among my favorites are the black ones centered with clear rhinestones, like stars floating on a cup of night. I position them as the Big Dipper. One, elongated and made of wood, is shaped like a lozenge for a barn. Anchors and sailboats in relief, metal holds rank overall, but cannot recite ocean waves as the mother of pearl, wafer thin with its curvaceous tan hues. Each button is cool and smooth as a worry stone. I can feel them there. The touch of my mother, aunts, and uncles, their small fingers fumbling buttons, starting at the top of the shirt until one side is longer at the bottom. My grandmother never seemed to smile. She didn't sing or pick guitar while the family played music on the porch. For perfume, she dabbed vanilla behind her ear. She wore no jewelry, no diamonds or gems brilliant in a blue velvet-lined box. Even this button collection was utilitarian, to save money when sewing new clothes. She collected what was necessary to can or dry for the winter. No time for gluttonous collections of vintage dresses, hats, jewelry, rocks, depression glass, and old books that I must now purge. When the buttons pour out, some roll off the table and bounce out of sight. I put the rest back into the jar, an hourglass, starting over again with fewer seconds left to use. Potato chip lady on the Tonight Show. This is funny. You should have laughed. Thank you. I was leading you down a rigorous road there. She gave me hope that artists are everywhere, thinking deeply in ditches, looking adrift out office windows, or finding imagery at a potato chip factory. Among all those potato chips to be eaten or crushed, transient as sand art, she aimed to preserve the ones she found special. Nothing tastes more like nothing, sliced thin with salt on it, than potato chips. Lipids and starch in the scheme of nutrition, useful only for dancing across on tables. My grandmother dealt sliced potatoes onto the surface of the wood cook stove. The blackened rare treat formed a necessary memory for self-preservation, a longing for winter. Potato chips in noisy bags on buses or in classrooms epitomize why some people in other countries hate us. The potato chip lady before eBay and blogs, was alone in her search. Her job at the conveyor belt facilitated what she called seeing little objects. She found a dinosaur, a camel, a calf's head, Nixon, Alfred Hitchcock, Bob Hope, and renewed faith in the world. She even found a pair of socks. It is so hard to find a pair, she beamed. All I ever found was a heart. I wrapped it in tissue for protection. I forgot and threw the tissue away. Thus, I broke my own heart, the one I wanted to give you, to photograph and commemorate. Maybe a potato chip collection doesn't seem that important, but there was that riveting moment after Carson grabbed a chip from a bowl as she lovingly held one from her display. He crunched loudly. Suddenly, she looked at him in panic. All art, all poetry crumbled like babble before ascending with laughter on the paired wings of potato chips. And I want to read a few poems from my new book. It should be coming out next week or the week after. I'm going to start with one. It is about the late Kentucky poet and radio personality, Jim Webb, who was burned out 3 times for his activism in mountaintop removal and social justice. He spent his life fighting for the rest of us and for the mountains. I'll just read a couple. Wiley tells the history of Highlander. Used to, you could look off this deck and see black cars line the entire edge of that wide field below, the FBI, because of the carryings on of subversive activities like quilting, bug dancing, and Cherokee basket weaving. Highlander lets Salk meet here probably because we ride against mountaintop removal and don't break anything. Way back, people for unions came to learn how to organize. During the civil rights movement, Rosa Parks was here. Martin Luther King Jr. probably stood on this very spot. His thoughts fused to these blue mountains, noble thoughts and mountains still there. Above the black cars directed toward him like torpedoes. And I'm gonna read my last poem called 5 Words. Oh, and I referred to Jim Webb as Wally Coyote. That was his pen name. In the last video of Wally Coyote, congenial as ever, though recovering from pneumonia, he struggles from breathing the damp air. He becomes the pivot of Appalachian music, creeks, and campers there in the background. He treats the interviewer the way he treats everyone, as the most important person on earth. Asked if he will come back next year, his answer, definitely, stills our hearts. Asked to describe the festival in 5 words, he is delighted. A man of words, a man of his word. He counts out the words that almost spring from fingertips on one tremulous hand. He counts. We count on him. No years left for him to count on this hallowed land. He speaks for us all. Let the mountains ring forever. Thank you.
Peace, everyone. My name is Marlanda. I'm going to be reading from my new book of poems, Thresh Hold. Thank you so much to Malaprops and both Ann and Hilda. Happy to join them here. Origin. I was born on a fourth Sunday to my first lady, Grandma Thelma. My dark-skinned roll of hickory thigh meat and eyes disturbed her. She rubbed amby skin fade cream into my face to bless me. I heaved for my petrified ma, who would not cry. My father, my dark-skinned hope. In his arms I was cloaked. Beneath stars, my mother's mothers, my father's fathers worked. We were given a French last name, Dekine. Chartreuse blades of grass grew out of the spaces between their toes. The musty air filled with songs. My throat moans mimicking nightingales from the old world. I am bound for the kingdom after Florence Price and Marian Anderson. My granddaddy Silas was born on the Nightingale Plantation in Plantersville, South Carolina, on riverbanks that loved. 3 generations of my kin captured in a green-tinted photograph hanging in my daddy's den. Tonight, my eyes will take each old world bird from the cropped space, send them home with their songs and favorite foods. Look out for me, I'm a-coming too. With rice, okra, hard-boiled eggs, and Lord Calvert. My daddy says if I get out of my car on Nightingale land, the folks who own it might shoot. My daddy says, never leave the driveway. Glory into my soul. I watch all of my ascendants, their faces reflecting me in that photograph. Their eyes are dead, black-eyed Susans. If anybody asks you what's the matter with me, when I was 11 years old, my ma dropped me at my daddy's family graveyard and drove away. If I kept worrying, it's where I'd end up, she said. Terrified, I hid from my last name like a purple lizard beneath a magnolia leaf. I crossed the road, marking my distance. I put my hands in my pockets, hummed, running for my life. I didn't want to point. I tried to avoid the engraved D. I tried not to smell my grandma Lizzie's perfume, mothballs rising from the dirt. I listened to the chickadees around me. Today I drove myself to our family graveyard. With my windows slightly ajar, I watched smoke fleeing from my cigar. I'm sliding in no more struggle. I got out. I poured one for my Aunt Angie. Collecting myself. I opened the door and all the girls were gone. No one was peeking into my bathroom stall anymore. No one asked me if I am a boy today. It was just me, sitting on a cold floor, waiting to open my eyes. I imagined their spit was river water shined by moon. I could drink from it. Their laughter bloomed into my bloody noses. I loved all the girls. The closest I got to one of them was in 4th grade, PE, when India aimed the baseball and caught me hard in my eye. She ran over before the teacher could see, and she searched my face for blood. I waited for her to pick me up like I belonged to her. Want to say the reason I include Malachi, my dog, in the bio is because Malachi wrote these poems. He just allows me to travel around and read them. Actually, he runs out of the room when I'm practicing, especially this one. The title poem, Thresh Hold. Flooding in now, I rest, so I can harvest new worlds, already net so still. Without rest, I cannot hear my grandma Lizzie and my grandma Thelma. Without rest, I cannot hear my Aunt Carolyn composing for her Lord. I cannot hear my Aunt Angie cussing angels while guiding me across memoried waters. I am learning what real power is. A year ago, I wouldn't have felt our bright red, black, green chords of spirit calling. Women in my family have dropped dead one day, and the family kept right on working. I rest like I have tomorrows, growing on a vine outside. I rest like a horned owl. My ancestors turned into machines by rice is booming in Georgetown, sale extravaganza. I rest beneath my grandma Lizzie's oil-dressed magnolia, painted white and green at the trunk. I risk surrender to her dark sachet. West Africa caught my granddaddy Silas by the brain. Here's a cosmos I picked from his field of grasses. Women in my family have dropped dead one day, purple gown, and waiting for us in the next. I'm watching my time. I love to read and I can get a little lost with myself. Plantersville, South Carolina. It's where I grew up. I'm gonna take you on a tour. I'm also gonna take the Winyah Bay with us. I take the Winyah Bay on a tour de Plantersville. The local rice museum would like to come, but it cannot until its donors complete the following. 1, pamphlets and videos denote that the natives were not European discoverers. 2, its ticketed events acknowledge the enslaved West and Central Africans stolen to build a third of the nation's economy. And 3, its elevator is fixed so all the people can enter the museum safely. My grandma Thelma and grandpa Mose went to the same school right here. They'd walk up opposite sides of Exodus Drive. Now we are beside their house. This is a field where their school used to be. It's where my ma forgets she ever harvested squash. Down Jackson Village Road, up and at the bend, across from the Candy Lady's blue house, just before that big magnolia, is where my grandma Lizzie and granddaddy Silas were married. This iron ochre tub in my parents' front yard is where my daddy took hogs to slaughter when he was 9. Less than a mile from here is a creek where my kin disembark with fish rods, cold beer, and jokes. It's where I'll be ashes spread across the Black River. This is where people put flowers and crosses for whoever died at the crossroads. They call it respecting the dead. At the crossroad of Exodus Drive and Jackson Village Road is where I saw my first live alligator washed up from a hurricane, playing dead. I watched folks gather from 4 directions of the village for food. Here, still, is 300 acres of white-owned land where my ancestors were people, called booming rice industry. Yes, bienvenue means welcome in French. Yes, this is called Bienvenue Plantation. Just down the road is Chicora Wood Plantation, where the first US white woman planter who did not plant is honored by a plaque and her collections of my ancestors' narratives. It's where my great-great-granddaddy Friday is buried, and it's where I cannot go without permission. It's where I went on field trips and screamed with joy as my soft body flew down acres of wild water, slides over the smoothest grasses I'd ever seen, where I tried to be a child, spinning around a maypole, and I let my feet lift off the ground, just a bit. Granddaddy's tools. I am 33 the first time. I put my hands on a shovel the first time. I feel my dead granddaddy alive inside me. I am digging a hole to put me in with granddaddy's shovel. Daddy yells for me to stop. Lying in the middle of granddaddy's field of grasses, he says the moisture will make me sick, but my ears have a new fear filter. I am listening to spirit. I am not dying today. A special note about this next poem is that you'll notice that in the place of pronouns, I'm using the Gullah-Geechee term em, which is a gender neutral pronoun. Grain memory. A wishbone branch falls from my grandma Thelma's oak for me. What do you know about magic? He asked. He bends the old body down, turns the wishbone branch into a cross, places it around my neck. I am strapped at the Black River's right shoulder, remembering my grandpa Mose never wore anything but church. My purple head begins to feel cold as clergy, parched. I ask for water. He gives me water and rice, says to repeat after him. I am fly from nature, nature fly. 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 Ah, I get it. It's an affirmation, I say. And he laughs in wind ocean songs. He whispers, do not be trapped by language. A voice begins to beat my chest, cavity in rhythm, chaff threshed from grain, separating me from need. I thought I'd snapped, that wishbone branch myself. No, I am fly from nature, nature fly. At dusk, gleaming marigolds gathered beneath my feet, singing, we were stolen, shipped across the Atlantic. Invasive is a word I heard, stolen. Thrash, 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 and we speak in blue. This is the last poem I'll share. It's entitled Home Body. My bones are not just my own. I feed them honey, oranges, copper, and crystals. I clear my soul. My skeletal holds a mouthful of mundane magic. I come from everywhere. My words go everywhere. The wind always brings me back my first face. A red serpent circles my feet, forming itself into infinity. There, another bloody October moon. I am watching pine trees pick up their roots and walk. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is the end of the reading, but like Stephanie said, we have the books, we have the poets in the house, so please get yourself a copy or copies and come back here and have the poets sign for you. Next month, August 7th, we'll be here again, and should you happen to be around or have that hour free at 4:30, it would be a delight to see you. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening. And thank you to the poets.